The quarterly meeting cracked open like thunder when Miss Hart said, "This failure has one name." Emma felt every stare slice across the room as Miss Hart slammed a spreadsheet to the table. Emma said, "The numbers were altered after my handoff." Caleb rose from the back and said, "I saw the original and it matched." Miss Hart laughed without warmth and said, "Convenient memory." Emma's pulse steadied as if gripping an invisible rail. She said, "Blame is loud, but facts are patient." A murmur rippled. Someone snorted. Miss Hart said, "You'll apologize now." Emma swallowed and said, "I'll correct the record instead." The room held its breath, and fear finally met its match. The hallway emptied slowly, gossip trailing like cigarette smoke, and Emma kept walking until the quiet server alcove swallowed the noise. She pressed her palm to the cool wall and said, "My voice shook, but it didn't break." Caleb arrived, breath quick, holding his phone like an oath. He said, "The email proves the totals changed after your handoff." She exhaled, the air rough in her throat. Emma said, "Truth is a small lamp in a long tunnel." Caleb's stare softened. He said, "Then we guard it." She nodded once, "A private treaty." Emma said, "I won't beg to belong. I'll choose to stand." A cart rattled past and the world's ordinary hum resumed, but the tremor in her chest had become a line of steel, quiet and straight. Emma reached the street where rain smelled like pennies and bus brakes sang metal grief. She stood beneath an awning and called her father, listening to the old rasp that had taught her patience. He said, "Did you speak plain?" She said, "I did." He went quiet, the way a craftsman checks the grain before cutting. He said, "Then let the noise pass." She watched taillights bleed into the avenue's slick black spine and said, "They wanted an apology more than accuracy." He chuckled, soft as wood dust. He said, "People love their echo." She said, "I want my center." A pause gathered between them, steadying. He said, "Center lives where action meets values." She tucked the phone away, pulled rain into her lungs, and chose not to flinch. Back home, Emma set her keys on the table like small anchors and opened a blank page in her journal. She said, "Name the fear, then meet it." The pen dragged a first line and did not stop. She wrote the exchange in plain language, leaving out the dramatics that begged for attention. She said, "Silence can wound, but so can noise that dims the truth." The kettle clicked off, and the apartment filled with the soft mercy of steam. She underlined the numbers that mattered, circled where she stood, not where others pushed. She said, "I will not borrow their urgency or accept their map." The page ended, but the steadiness did not. She closed the book and felt the hinge of doubt loosen. Morning rose with the kind of pale light that doesn't promise, it invites. Emma stood before the mirror, buttoning her blazer, and said, "I answer only to what I can control." Her chest lifted and settled without haste. She packed the original figures into a slim folder and slid Caleb's printout behind them like a shield. She said, "If they ask for a show, I'll offer substance." The train doors later pressed her reflection into a moving pane, and she watched herself neither shrink nor swell. She said, "I'll walk into the same room as the same person." The station bell chimed, and the crowd poured forward. She joined at a human pace, not to be seen but to see clearly. The morning after, Emma sat alone in the break room, fluorescent light humming overhead. She stirred lukewarm coffee, staring at her reflection in the liquid more than drinking it. Caleb walked in, holding a folder under his arm, and said, "They're already whispering about yesterday." Emma smiled faintly, a gesture without warmth. She said, "Let them. My silence won't feed them, and my words won't change them." Caleb leaned against the counter, eyes sharp. "But you changed something. You didn't fold." Emma sighed, setting the cup down with deliberate care. "It wasn't courage. It was exhaustion. Years of letting others decide my place. Yesterday, I refused to move." Caleb nodded, his voice quieter. "That's courage in disguise." Emma looked at him for a long moment, then whispered, "If that's true, Then disguise is all I've ever known. Later that day, Emma stepped into the building's quiet stairwell, clutching the railing like it could steady her breath. The clamor of office chatter faded into concrete silence. "I'll," she whispered to herself. "Fear is loud, but it isn't final." The sound of footsteps startled her, and Miss Hart appeared, heels echoing sharply against the steps. Miss Hart stopped one level above, gazing down with practiced disdain. "You embarrassed this department." Emma's stomach tightened, but her eyes remained steady. "I clarified the record." Ms. Hart smirked. "No one remembers truth, only who bends first." Emma inhaled deeply, the pause itself becoming defiance. "Then let them remember I stood." Ms. Hart's face twitched for a moment, a crack in her armor, before she continued down the steps without another word. Emma stayed still, each heartbeat heavy, but her posture refusing to fold. That evening, Emma walked home through drizzle, the city buzzing with neon reflections on slick asphalt. She dialed her father again, her voice carrying fatigue. "They wanted me quiet," he replied calmly. "You spoke." She hesitated, then said, "But did it matter? They'll still twist it?" His tone carried that patient gravel she'd known since childhood. "Truth is not for them. It is for you." Emma stopped under a flickering streetlight, her umbrella tilted, rain streaking her coat. She said, "I want to feel like I belong." He answered, "Belonging is borrowed. Integrity is owned." Her breath caught, as though the weight shifted from her chest to her spine. "Then I'll own it," she whispered. The line went silent, but the steadiness in her steps as she continued home felt like an answer. Back in her apartment, Emma changed into softer clothes and sat on the couch with a worn notebook open on her lap. She wrote slowly. Fear visited. I welcomed it. It left with less power. She tapped the pen against the margin, whispering, "Every small stand is still a stand." Her phone buzzed with Caleb's message. "I saved copies of the files. They can't erase the proof now." She exhaled, relief mingled with gratitude. She typed back, "Thank you. Even stones in the pocket feel lighter when shared." Moments later, Caleb replied, "Then let me carry some weight when it gets heavy." Emma smiled faintly, tracing the words on her page again. "Quiet courage," she whispered. "Maybe it doesn't roar. Maybe it only whispers and waits." The next morning, Emma stood in the elevator, folder pressed tightly against her chest. Colleagues whispered around her, two laughing softly at something on their phone. She caught her reflection in the mirrored wall, her face calm but pale. A voice in her head whispered, "You don't belong here." She answered aloud, so quietly no one noticed, "I belong to myself." The doors opened, and the group filed out. Emma stayed behind a moment, watching the doors begin to close again before stepping forward. The hesitation had been small, but she recognized it for what it was. Another test passed. As she walked into the office, fluorescent lights buzzing, she thought, "I don't need their approval to stand. The ground is already mine." The office buzzed like a hive the following week, but every glance seemed sharper, every laugh slightly tilted toward Emma. She carried her folder of corrected numbers into the boardroom, only to find Miss Hart already there, her voice smooth as glass. "Emma has been revising documents," she announced, sliding Emma's work across the table. Independent work, unsanctioned, and potentially misleading. Emma's heart pounded, but she kept her face steady. She said, "I revised nothing. I restored what was altered." Murmurs spread, some colleagues smirking, others shifting uncomfortably. Caleb cleared his throat in the back, but Ms. Hart cut in, voice raised. "We can't run a department on her accusations and feelings." Emma met her gaze directly and said, "Then run it on truth, not politics." The room quieted, half in shock, half in discomfort, and Emma felt the room tilt further against her. In the restroom afterward, Emma splashed cold water on her face, watching droplets slide down the mirror. A younger colleague, Marissa, entered, glancing nervously before whispering, "They're saying you were difficult and reckless." Emma's throat tightened, but she said softly, "Difficult is what they call persistence." Marissa hesitated, then added, "Men's Hart says you'll bring the team down." Emma met her reflection, jaw steady though her chest burned. "Then I'll bring it down standing." Marissa frowned, whispering, "Why not just apologize? It would be easier." Emma turned toward her, eyes sharp but calm. "Easy doesn't last. Truth does." Marissa looked away, uncomfortable, and slipped out, leaving Emma alone with the echo of her own words, stronger than she felt but necessary to say. That evening, Emma sat with Caleb in a quiet diner, neon buzzing faintly outside. Caleb leaned forward, voice hushed. "You're making enemies faster than allies." Emma sipped her coffee, bitter on her tongue. "Enemies have always been here. They're just louder now." Caleb sighed. "Heart is powerful. She can bury you." Emma's hand trembled on the cup, but her voice didn't. "She can bury me, but not the numbers. They'll outlast her voice." Caleb studied her, admiration flickering beneath his frustration. "Why keep pushing when you know you're outnumbered?" Emma lowered her gaze to the swirling coffee, whispering, "Because silence already cost me too much. I won't pay that price again." The diner felt smaller, the neon buzz louder, but her words steadied both of them. The next day, Emma found her desk half cleared, files gone, her nameplate crooked. A worker muttered as they passed, "Maybe Hart's right. You're making trouble." Emma sat down slowly, feeling the sting of every empty folder. She said aloud, "Paper is gone, but memory remains." A voice behind her muttered sarcastically, "Maybe keep your philosophy for after hours." Emma turned to find Daniel smirking, his tone sharp. "Hart protects us, you're risking all of it." Her voice didn't rise, it steadied. "Hart protects herself, I'm protecting truth." Daniel rolled his eyes and walked away, but Emma stayed seated, folding her hands calmly on the empty desk. Inside, her chest throbbed with loneliness, but she refused to show it, not here, not now. At home that night, Emma opened her journal, but the words refused to come. She stared at the blank page until tears blurred her sight. She whispered, "Am I stubborn, or am I foolish?" The silence pressed back heavy, but then her phone buzzed. A message from Caleb. "They'll never say it, but they saw you stand." "I saw it." Emma's tears slipped down freely, landing on the page, making small circles of ink where her pen finally moved. She wrote, "Fear grows in silence. So will I." She closed the book and whispered again, steadier this time, "I will not vanish. Not into fear. Not into their shadows." The apartment was still, but the quiet no longer felt empty. It felt earned, like armor forged in solitude. Emma sat in the dim records room, dust clinging to the shelves of forgotten files. She tugged open a drawer, fingers trailing across faded labels until one folder made her freeze. Her report, untouched, time-stamped before Hart's edits. She whispered, "So it wasn't me." Caleb appeared in the doorway, breathless from running. "I found something too," he said, holding up an email. "Hart's not the only one. She was told to bury this by someone above." Emma's eyes flicked to the old report, then to the glowing email on Caleb's screen. "So it was deliberate," she said, voice cold. Caleb nodded grimly. "They made you the scapegoat because you were quiet, easy to erase." Emma's throat tightened, fury sharpening her tone. "They thought silence was safety. They forgot silence can break." The next morning, Emma walked into the office with the folder pressed to her side like a weapon. Ms. Hart was already waiting, lips curved in a thin smile. "Still chasing ghosts?" she asked. Emma set the file on Hart's desk and said, "This isn't a ghost, it's my report, untouched." Hart's face flickered for half a second before she laughed. "Outdated records, nothing more." Emma's voice cut sharper. "And the email Caleb found? Orders from above? That wasn't outdated. That was obedience." Hart's jaw clenched, silence louder than denial. Colleagues nearby froze, pretending not to listen, ears tilted toward them. Emma leaned in, her voice low, but unshakable. "You buried truth to climb higher. But you buried me because you thought I wouldn't fight. You miscalculated." At lunch, Emma and Caleb sat on the steps out the building, sunlight cold against their faces. Caleb muttered, "If they're protecting her, this runs deeper than either of us." Emma watched traffic pulse past, voice steady. "That means the lie isn't hers alone. It belongs to the system." Caleb frowned. "And you're going to take on the system?" Emma's hands rested calmly on her lap, but her voice held steel. "I'm not taking it on. I'm refusing to bow to it." Caleb sighed, shaking his head. "They'll make your life hell." Emma turned, meeting his eyes. "They already tried. I'm still standing." A silence stretched, filled by the city's restless noise. Caleb finally said softly, "Then maybe standing is enough to make them afraid." That evening, Emma returned to her apartment and spread documents across the table, her journal open beside them. She whispered as she wrote, "The twist is not that they lied. The twist is that they believed I'd never notice." Her pen underlined words with slow precision: complicity, silence, survival. She stopped, hands trembling, before adding, "I will not carry their silence as my own." The room was quiet, except for the hum of her fridge, yet it felt like the city itself leaned closer to listen. She thought of Marissa, of the colleagues who laughed, of those too afraid to speak. She whispered, "I may not win, but I will not disappear." Her words hung in the air like a vow carved into stone. The next day, an all-hands meeting was called. Emma entered slowly, the folder clutched at her side, heart hammering but face composed. Miss Hart stood before the team, beginning her usual speech on performance. Emma interrupted quietly but firmly. "Before we talk about performance, let's talk about truth." Heads turned, whispers rippled. Hart snapped, "This isn't your floor, Emma." Emma stepped forward, opening the folder, pages spread across the table. "These are the numbers, unedited. These are the emails proving who ordered their erasure. You can call me difficult, you can call me reckless, but you cannot call me silent." The room fell still, as though the air itself paused. For the first time, Hart's authority wavered, and Emma's voice carried further than fear. The boardroom filled with uneasy chatter until the director entered, adjusting his tie, eyes cool as glass. Miss Hart stood ready, her tone clipped. "We must address Emma's disruptions." Emma rose slowly, folder in hand, voice even but strong. "Disruptions are truths no one wished to carry." The director frowned. "You've undermined leadership. Explain yourself." Emma opened the folder and laid the untouched report flat. "I submitted this weeks ago. These figures were altered after submission. The edits hid losses, and the blame was placed on me because I was quiet enough to frame." Gasps rippled. Hart interjected sharply, "She twists details?" Emma cut her off, gaze steady. "I don't twist truth. I stand in it." Her chest lifted as silence fell. For the first time, the director's eyes narrowed, not at her, but at Hart. Hart's voice cracked, louder now. "You're overstepping. You think this room will protect you?" Emma didn't flinch. "I don't need protection. I need honesty." The director raised a hand, silencing Hart. "Emma, do you claim deliberate manipulation?" Emma met his eyes, pulse racing, voice calm. "Yes, and not just by her, by a system that teaches us silence is survival." Colleagues shifted uncomfortably, whispers buzzing at the edges. Emma continued, louder now. "Every one of you saw the mismatched totals. You said nothing. You feared the consequences more than the truth. I will not apologize for refusing to vanish." Hart slammed her palm on the table. "She's insubordinate." Emma said quietly but firmly, "No, I am awake." The tension cracked like glass. Caleb stood from the back, voice steady but resonant. "She's telling the truth. I have the emails." Gasps swirled as he projected them on the screen. Lines of instruction glowed. "Alter figures. Avoid escalation. Shift accountability." The director's jaw hardened. Hart stammered, "Those were taken out of context." Caleb interrupted. "No context absolves deception." Emma's hands curled into fists at her sides. though her voice remained calm. This is not about me anymore. It's about a culture that buries truth under fear. I may be quiet, but I am not invisible. Her voice grew, filling the room. And I will not be erased for their convenience. Silence reigned, heavy and undeniable. The director leaned back, eyes heavy with calculation, then finally spoke. Emma, what is it you seek? She inhaled slowly, letting silence stretch before answering. I don't seek revenge. I don't seek position. I seek a space where truth does not cost someone their dignity. Hart scoffed. Idealism won't pay the bills. Emma turned her gaze toward her colleagues, her voice soft but unwavering. Idealism is not my demand. Integrity is, and if we trade it away, then we've already sold ourselves for nothing. For a moment, the colleagues shifted, shame painting their expressions. Caleb whispered, just loud enough, she's right. Emma's throat tightened, but she stood taller. Fear doesn't vanish when confronted, but it loses its grip when we refuse to kneel. The meeting broke with silence so thick it seemed to press against Emma's skin. As people filed out, some avoided her eyes, but a few paused, nodding slightly, acknowledging the stand she had made. Hart stormed out, her authority cracked but not gone. Emma remained at the table, shoulders heavy, folder still in hand. Caleb approached quietly. You realize nothing will be the same after this. Emma exhaled, voice faint but steady. I know. That's the point. She glanced at the empty chairs, then back at him. If fear ruled me yesterday, it won't today. Let the cost come. I'll pay it in full. Caleb's face softened, pride hidden beneath concern. You didn't just speak, Emma. You shook the room. She closed her eyes briefly, whispering. Then let the echo last longer than my voice. The office was quieter the next morning, as though the walls themselves had absorbed the weight of yesterday's meeting. Emma walked through the corridor, folder tucked against her side, eyes steady though her stomach still nodded. Some colleagues lowered their gaze when she passed, while others unexpectedly nodded faintly. Marissa caught her arm near the copier and whispered, I'm sorry. I thought you were reckless, but you were reckless. But you were right. Emma met her eyes, not unkindly, and said, Truth feels reckless when you've lived in fear long enough. Marissa's eyes flickered with shame. Doesn't it scare you, standing alone? Emma's voice softened. It terrifies me. But fear is no longer my guide. Marissa nodded, lips trembling with something between apology and admiration, before slipping away. Emma exhaled, realizing she was not as alone as she thought. At lunch, Caleb found Emma outside, seated on a bench beneath a tree, whose leaves rattled faintly in the wind. He handed her a sandwich, dropping beside her without ceremony. You know Hart is furious. She's pulling strings, trying to bury the fallout. Emma unwrapped the sandwich slowly, answering, let her pull. Threads only snap when tugged too hard. Caleb chuckled softly. You sound like your journal again. Emma glanced at him, faint smile forming. Maybe I finally trust my own words. Caleb leaned back, watching clouds drift between glass towers. You changed something, Emma. I don't know what it becomes, but it's different now. She closed her eyes briefly, voice a whisper. Then let different be enough. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was steady, like the pause between breaths. That evening, Emma stood in her apartment, staring at the stack of papers she had spread across her kitchen table. The untouched report sat on top, clean and undeniable. She whispered, they tried to erase you, and through you, me. She ran her fingers over the typed lines, feeling the weight of both injustice and vindication. The phone buzzed. A message from her father. I read the news. I'm proud of you. Her throat tightened as tears brimmed. She whispered back to the empty room. I finally spoke plain. She typed her reply carefully. I didn't win. But I didn't vanish. His answer came quickly. That's victory enough. She sank into her chair, tears sliding freely now, but her face calm. She whispered to herself. Fear bent me. Truth straightened me. The following day, an email circulated. Ms. Hart was taking a leave of absence. The office buzzed with speculation, whispers like bees circling a hive. Emma read the announcement once, then closed it. Caleb appeared at her desk, lips quirking. Leave of absence. Translation: she's been clipped. Emma looked up, voice steady. She'll return, or someone else will replace her. Fear doesn't retire that easily. Caleb nodded thoughtfully. Maybe not, but you showed them it can bleed. Emma tilted her head, faint smile breaking. And blood stains louder than whispers. Colleagues glanced their way, but for once their stares did not cut. They lingered, uncertain, maybe curious. Emma turned back to her work, whispering under her breath. I'll let them wonder. Wonder is the first crack in silence. That night, Emma returned to her journal. She opened to a fresh page, writing slowly, each stroke deliberate. Fear arrives uninvited. It settles in silence. It thrives in shadows. But when we breathe its name, it loses weight. She paused, pen hovering before adding, I spoke. I remain. She whispered aloud as if confessing to the quiet. I am not fearless. I am simply unwilling to kneel. She closed the book gently and placed it on the table beside her sister's old photograph. Leaning back, she exhaled fully, the kind of breath that seemed to leave more space inside her than before. Her eyes lifted toward the window, where the city lights glimmered in steady rhythm. For the first time, the lights didn't overwhelm her. They simply shared their glow. Emma stood on the rooftop parking deck at dusk, the city spread beneath her in golden haze. She held her journal close, the wind tugging at its pages. Caleb stepped beside her, quiet for a moment before saying, You're different now. I don't think you even notice it. Emma smiled faintly, eyes on the horizon. I notice, I just don't measure myself the way they did anymore. Caleb leaned on the rail, his voice raw. You've carried more than anyone should. You could walk away now. Emma's gaze didn't falter. I don't need to walk away. I need to stand exactly here, proof that fear didn't take me. Caleb let the silence stretch, then whispered, You don't realize, you've become what others will look to. Emma finally turned toward him, eyes calm. If they must look, let them see that trembling doesn't mean surrender. The next morning, Emma walked through the office lobby, colleagues parting slightly as she passed. Marissa hurried up, voice tentative. I thought about what you said, about fear. Emma stopped, offering a patient look. Marissa's voice cracked. I've stayed silent so long because I thought silence kept me safe. Emma's reply was gentle but firm. It does keep you safe, but safety is not living. Safety is waiting for permission that never comes. Marissa's eyes welled, and she whispered, I want to try. To stand, even if I shake. Emma rested a hand briefly on her shoulder. Then shake, but stand anyway. You'll find the ground doesn't break. Marissa nodded, tears slipping, and for the first time, Emma saw a small echo of her own resolve reflected back at. That evening, Emma met her father at a quiet park bench, leaves rustling overhead. He studied her face carefully before saying, You sound lighter over the phone. Lighter than I've heard in years. Emma smiled softly. Maybe because I finally stopped waiting for someone to hand me courage. He chuckled, the sound lined with age, and found it waiting inside. She looked down at her hands, whispering, It was always there, but buried under fear, under doubt. He leaned forward. And now? Emma lifted her eyes, the lamplight catching their steady gleam. Now I am not free from fear. I am simply unwilling to kneel to it. Her father's lips curved with pride, his hand resting briefly on hers. Then you've already won. The following week, Emma returned to the boardroom, not summoned, but by choice. The table stretched long, executives murmuring until she entered, carrying nothing but her notebook. The director looked up, surprised. We weren't expecting you. Emma nodded calmly. I didn't come to argue. I came to remind you that silence no longer protects you. Hart's empty chair sat at the far end, a reminder of how fragile power can be. Emma opened her notebook and read one line. Fear breeds in silence, but courage begins in the same place. She closed it gently, her voice steady. I'll speak when I must, and I will not be erased. The room held still. For once, no one challenged her. The absence of resistance felt like acknowledgement, quiet but undeniable. On her balcony that night, Emma stood wrapped in a sweater, the city lights pulsing like distant stars. She whispered into the dark, I was afraid, every step. But I stepped anyway. She placed her journal on the railing, flipping to the last page. Slowly she wrote, I am still afraid, but I am no longer ruled. She set the pen down, exhaling fully, a release that left her chest spacious and free. Caleb's message pinged on her phone. You've changed everything, more than you know. Emma smiled faintly, eyes on the horizon. She whispered to herself, maybe not everything, but enough. The wind carried her words into the night, fragile but unbroken, and for the first time she felt not just present, but unshakably alive.